What's up, you guys? Welcome to Walk the Line. We're talking UFC 309. We got the UFC's heavyweight championship of the world on the line. We got John Bones Jones taking on Stipe Miocic. I believe there's a lot more on the line than just the UFC's heavyweight title. Okay, this is an absolute legacy fight. I just put out a video yesterday breaking down my top 5 pound for pound GOAT list, and I did settle in with John Jones at the #1 spot. I had Stipe essentially at that 6th spot, and I was tossing and turning all last night after recording it. The more I've been thinking about it, I think that Stipe may deserve to be over Demetrious Johnson at that 5 spot. When you understand that Miocic is the greatest heavyweight fighter of all time, okay, you have to understand that first and foremost. Take a look at the numbers. The numbers don't lie. Miocic having 6 title victories inside the UFC. Cain Velasquez is at 4, just to put things into perspective. I know Velasquez is probably another name that a lot of people are going to want to throw around in that conversation. Miocic trumps him in all major statistics when you're talking about being a top-tier champ. Miocic with the most title defenses in UFC history in the heavyweights division at 3. He has the most finishes in title fights at 4. You take a look at some of the names that he has on his resume. It runs deep. 2 victories over Daniel Cormier. DC in the top 10 GOAT rankings probably, or he's on the verge of being in the top 10. Maybe he just missed mine, but he's right up there. Okay, he's one of the all-time greats. Okay, to have 2 victories over him, that says a lot. He's one of the only men that could ever say he went out there and defeated Francis Ngannou, which Francis Ngannou probably one of those fighters that you're going to be arguing to maybe be the greatest heavyweight of all time. He's another fighter you could put into that mix, but Stipe 1-1 with him, of course. Ngannou did get his revenge in the rematch there. I wish we were able to see the trilogy. Unfortunately, Ngannou chose to depart from the UFC, and that's going to be a little bit of a stain on his resume because we're never going to be able to see him run his resume extremely deep throughout the years. Okay, fighting over in the PFL, that's not going to cut it. You take a look at some of these other names, man. Knocked out Alistair Overeem. He knocked out JDS Junior Dos Santos. How about when he knocked out Fabricio Verdum to snatch the title up? Okay, Fabricio Verdum is another fighter that's kind of in that mix as one of the heavyweight GOATs. I mean, these are serious names, okay, when you're looking at his resume here. So this is a legacy fight. If Stipe Miocic can go out here and defeat John Jones, it's going to be huge for the legacy of Stipe Miocic. And to circle back, why I had a little bit of regret putting DJ over Miocic, it really boils down to the fact that the heavyweight division is a division that just carries a lot more weight, okay, no pun intended, than the flyweight division, especially back then. You guys know I've been very high in the flyweight division as of these days. I think it's running a lot more deep, but the flyweight division it wasn't as deep back then. And I know the heavyweight division is not a division that's really known for running deep, but when you take a look at the pinnacle of the division, the top of the division, there's some big hitters up there, and the heavyweight division is the hardest division, or it's notoriously been known to be the hardest division to have that title reign. Okay, to reign supreme for a long period of time. If you ever take a look at the numbers of title defenses and whatnot, it's always been very low compared to other divisions. And Demetrious Johnson was winning rematches and whatnot. And Demetrious Johnson's a fighter that also took a loss to Brad Pickett early on. A lot of people thought that he lost that inaugural flyweight fight against Ian McCall. He won the rematch there and whatnot. And I know Stipe took his occasional awkward loss too, right? I think he was knocked out by Stefan Struve back in the day. That was a brutal one. But all in all, when you mix the whole recipe together, I mean, I think you put more weight into what Stipe Miocic has done in the fight game. I think that's a serious accolade, being the greatest heavyweight fighter of all time. So not to harp on that, guys. Just want to talk about what's on the line here. This is a huge fight for both men. Okay, if John Jones goes out here and gets this victory over Stipe, probably runs off into retirement after, I don't know. There's a little bit of buzz of maybe him fighting Alex Pereira. Of course, there's been a lot of buzz about him fighting Tom Aspinall, but he's completely dismissing all that. I believe he wants nothing to do with that fight. Okay, I think Tom Aspinall is the greatest heavyweight on earth right now, and I think he's a much dangerous fighter. He's a much harder puzzle to figure out, and John Jones doesn't want any of that. Okay, Alex Pereira, phenomenal striker. I think John Jones feels he can go the grappling route there, and Tom Aspinall is a phenomenal grappler. He moves differently. He's way larger, and I think that he doesn't want any of that. So I'll just say that right now, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about UFC 309. Hopefully, Charles Oliveira is going to stay on this card. I know there was a little bit of buzz about him withdrawing from his fight with Michael Chandler. As I'm recording this, nothing has been confirmed. Fight seems to still be underway. There's been some rumors if he does fall off the card that Dustin Poirier may step in, maybe Renato Moicano. I'll keep you guys updated with that. If anything changes, I will definitely have a breakdown for whatever fight that is going to be in the co-main event. I love this card, man. You guys know I'm very pumped for Bo Nickal's career to really get rolling. I think he's a fighter. I know this is a very early statement, but he's a fighter that one day could be in that mix. And I get it. It's a very premature statement, but Bo Nickal has some serious potential. You better throw Elliott Topuria, throw his name in the mix as far as a fighter that has the potential to be in that pound-for-pound GOAT, top 10 rankings and whatnot. But this is a great card. I won't bore you guys anymore with this intro. Some of you guys don't like these intros. I like to kind of give a little preview of what we're talking about here, but I'm excited to jump into these fights. Just want to let you guys know, if anybody wants to work with me for this event, reach out to me, shoot me an email or shoot me a DM on Instagram or Twitter. Go follow me on Instagram and Twitter where you're going to check me out there. I got those scrolling below. And what else? Oh, last thing. If anyone's looking to sign up to a new sports book, reach out to me. I'll give you my referral link to BetUS. You sign up through my link. I'm going to give you guys a special gift, and you'll also get a 150% match on your first 3 deposits. All right, guys. As you guys can tell, I'm buzzing, man. I'm ready to go. I got a Fat Boy coffee over here to my right. I'm really excited for these fights. Did a ton of research. All right, we crammed a lot of tape for this card. Let's go jump into the first fight.
The teller.
The first fight we'll be talking about is taking place in the women's flyweight division, and I believe that's very important. I'll explain why here in a second. We got Veronica Hardy taking on Eduarda Moura. If you're looking at this fight, right off the top of your head, you may feel that Eduarda Moura is going to tower over Hardy. And that may be based on the fact that Eduarda Moura, who used to fight down in the strawweight division, she was one of the largest strawweight fighters that we've ever seen. I mean, she was massive down there. Now she's coming up in weight. Remember, Hardy is a fighter that's dabbled fighting in the bantamweight division and in the flyweight division. And I would still say she's a little bit of an undersized flyweight, even at that, even though she's fought up in the bantamweight division. And that could kind of give us an idea why she's taken some tough L's throughout her career. Specifically, I like to say as in her first stint in the UFC, because she had a very long layoff before recently coming back into that Juliana Miller fight, which she was coming into that fight on a 3-year layoff, and she's looked to be a completely different version of herself. And I'll tell you why. Understand the Bea Malecki fight. That was a fight that took place in the bantamweight division. She was very undersized in that fight. She was very undersized against Ashley Evans Smith. Ashley Evans Smith was huge, and she was able to get on top of her, rain down some ground and pound and whatnot. But also understand that Hardy was just 20 years old at the time of that fight. When you take a look at some of her early fights that were against high-level competition, when you're talking Jillian Robertson, Andrea Lee, these are high-level fighters, and Hardy was very young at the time, formerly known as Veronica Macedo, now Veronica Hardy. Dan Hardy doing pretty good there, huh, boys? And we have to give him some massive credit for the evolution that we've seen in Veronica Hardy. I really do believe that. From what I've seen, they are very close. I believe they're engaged. Not sure if they're married yet, but they spent a lot of time together. And Dan Hardy is a fighter, a man that's been around the fight game for a very long time. He has a very high fight IQ. You know, he was a career mixed martial artist. Not a lot of people know that about him. They think of him as more of a knockout artist, a guy that was just hitting dudes with heavy left hooks and whatnot. No, he was a fighter that dabbled in the traditional mixed martial arts from a very young age. I think he's a very cerebral personality in the fight game. I know he's not fighting these days, but I think that he has a great deal to do with the evolution that we've seen in Veronica Hardy. That mixed with her age, with her just starting to come into her prime. She's now 29 years old. I like her in this spot because she's the more well-rounded fighter. Eduarda Moura is a fighter that was a little bit of a size bully. She has good judo skills. She'll rip you down to the mat, and her grappling is high level. It's decently high level. She can get away with mauling you down in the mat and pulling off a sub on you. But I think that Veronica Hardy can avoid that type of situation. I like Hardy in this spot because I do believe that she's the more well-rounded mixed martial artist. If she's taken down, she's shown to work back up to her feet pretty well as of recently. I think she'll even look sharper there, knowing that Eduarda Moura is going to have that type of game plan. As Hardy gets this fight back up to her feet, or as she uses her footwork to avoid those types of situations, she'll be the cleaner striker. She has that Taekwondo background. Okay, she is a high-level kickboxer, if you will, as far as women's mixed martial arts goes, and she'll get the better of the striking exchanges. And when you run the tape back on Moura's last fight, which went to a split decision, I thought that she lost the fight against Denise Gomes. She showed that she was limited when she wasn't able to completely control her fighter down on the mat. The one thing that I will give her, though, is that she is relentless. If you stuff takedowns on her, even when she looked all gassed and whatnot in that fight, she's going to continuously push forward. That's one aspect that she could have success with, is if she just continues to grind and push forward with those takedown attempts and work on those judo throws. And if she can solidify some of those on Hardy and use her, maybe that size advantage that she still should have, even going up in weight, maybe she controls her enough to snag some rounds up. Maybe she could pull off a sub, which we know she has some serious sub skills, having half of her victories come by way of sub. We've seen Veronica Hardy lose fights in that manner, but it was a very old version of herself when you think of the sub that she lost to Jillian Robertson down on the map. But I like Veronica Hardy here. Like I said, I'll take the more complete mixed martial artist that's really starting to put it together. With Moura, you're really relying on one aspect of the fight game for her to have success, to get the job done. You're relying too much on her dominating with the grappling. And I'll take Hardy here. Hardy opened up as a -150 on BetUS. She's now a -155 as I'm recording this. And, that line, not too bad if you ask me. I'll take Hardy there. I think there's some decent value on that line. I'll side with her even with a little bit of chalk next to it. Moura just kind of put a bad taste in my mouth rewatching that last fight. That was a tough one against Gomes there, and Hardy should get the job done. I'm going to take Veronica Hardy to win this fight via decision. To the welterweight division, where we got the Welsh gangster Oban Elliott taking on Bassil Hafez. Elliott had his coming out party in his last fight. I would say, without a doubt, that was the biggest victory of his career. Gets that UFC victory over a somewhat respectable name in Preston Parsons. Some of you guys may not be as high on him as I am. I think Parsons is not a bad fighter, but when you're comparing Parsons to the Val Woodburns of the world, or even the Kike Brito, and not that Brito has proven to be a horrendous fighter, but that was a fight that played out very competitively, and Elliott went through some adversity in that fight, and that wasn't the case against Parsons. I thought he looked very good in that fight, and he showed his true potential. Oban Elliott, he's a career mixed martial artist. His dad was an amateur boxer, put him and his brothers in judo and boxing from a young age. He's still only 26 years old. I think that he's actually showing to have some real potential. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, I didn't really think that was the case prior to the Parsons fight. And I still do have concerns about his chin. He's a fighter that has been knocked out in both of his 2 losses, one against a questionable opponent, the other one against Mike Figlak, who is a respectable fighter, so take that for what you will. But I think you should have some concerns with his chin. And when you have a fighter like Bassil Hafez, who's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, but also he's a fighter that is very scrappy and doesn't have a long list of knockouts, but he, as we saw in the Jack Della Maddalena fight, he'll go into the octagon and he will throw caution to the wind. He'll look to knock you out. Okay, so if Oban Elliott gets involved into that type of fight, if he's involved in a war, there is a possibility he can get clipped and that chin can give way once again. Just understand that. Okay, but all in all, I think that Elliott's going to get the better of the striking exchanges. I'm really pleased with some of the grappling that he's shown as well, so I think he should be able to handle anything that Hafez throws his way that way. And you take a look at Hafez's last fight against Mickey Gall, I was not that impressed with that. That was a fight that played out a lot closer than I thought it would have. I know Hafez did win the unanimous decision, and I actually had him mixed in some action there. We put some money in our pocket with that play, but I thought that he was going to absolutely dominate Mickey, and I thought that he should have been I thought that he should have got a finish in that fight. I think Mickey Gall is a fighter. We'll be talking about him here in a second, but I think that Mickey Gall, I like him as far as his personality goes, but I don't know if he's really a UFC caliber fighter. And he's shown some development. Maybe we should give him some credit for that performance because it was a competitive fight, but I look at it a little bit more in the sense that Bassil Hafez showed to take a step back compared to his UFC debut where he went in there and hung with a fighter in Jack Della Maddalena, who is a fighter that could be fighting for the belt relatively soon. Okay, so maybe Bassil Hafez is one of those fighters that fights to the level of his opponent. We've seen him go in there and have competitive fights with low-level fighters. We've seen him lose fights to lower-level fighters. And I think in that Mickey Gall fight, we kind of saw that it's not like Bassil Hafez just took this major leap, and now he's a fighter that's going to be ready to battle in the top 15 consistently for the next couple of years. I don't know if that's the type of fighter he is. I think that he's a fun fighter to watch. I think he brings some serious skills to the octagon, but there's something missing with him. Oban Elliott is a fighter that's surging right now, in my opinion, at 26 years old. Is going to look better and better. I think he's more fine-tuned with his striking. You take a look at the numbers here. Bassil Hafez, we talked about how he'll look to land volume on you, landing 4.23 strikes per minute, which is higher than Oban's 3.82. But look at the absorbed strikes per minute at 5.53 compared to the 2.23 of Elliott. And you see that on tape. Oban Elliott is way more technical. Bassil Hafez is there to be hit. I think Elliott should be the fighter landing the cleaner shots here. I think that, like I said with the grappling, it's been looking pretty clean from Oban as well. I think he handles anything going on there, and he's the better fighter. I like Oban Elliott to get the job done here. I think now we just got to talk about, does he get a finish? He's somewhat of a fight finisher. We've seen him take his fair share of decision victories as well, but Bassil is a fighter that's shown to be very durable. I'm not necessarily going to fade him to be finished in this spot. He's never been finished as a pro. I'm going to say Oban Elliott gets a similar victory to his last fight against Preston Parsons, just showing to be the more well-rounded fighter and handling everywhere the fight goes. Give me Oban Elliott to win a unanimous decision. Let's take a look at the betting line. A very similar line, almost the same thing going on as that Veronica Hardy fight we just talked about. He opened up as a -150. He's now -155. This is another fight where I like the favorite here. I think the value is more on the favorites line, even at that -155 line. I'm curious what you guys think. Hit the comment section up below. Maybe some of you guys feel there's some value on Hafez, but I like Oban here. I wouldn't be surprised if that line gets steamed a little bit and we see him settle as like a -190 on some of these sports books leading up to that bell ringing. Speak of the devil, Gall is taking on Ramiz Brahimaj, fight taking place in the welterweight division. We were just talking about old Mickey boy, 7-6 as a pro. If you guys remember how he kicked off his UFC career, it was a very interesting time in the fight game. Back then, obviously I was much younger. I was much more involved in training and fighting and whatnot. And I'm sitting there watching that fight take place against Mike Jackson, or of course the CM Punk fight. That was a big one, right? I'm sitting there watching that fight take place. And it's not every day that you're watching a fight take place in the octagon and you know in your heart you can go in there and whoop one of the dudes, right? And I'm talking about CM Punk, of course. The teller, without a doubt, would have been a -1,500 to a -2,000 to not only win the fight against CM Punk, but I'm pulling off a teller team. I'm getting the sub, okay? So you're attacking the sub prop line heavily, okay? And that was just a weird time when you think about it. And I always kind of still look at Mickey in that light as he's kind of a gimmicky fighter, but you got to give him some credit. He definitely has sharpened up his skill set over the years, and he's trained with some serious gyms. He left New Jersey from just training at his local little dojo gym where he had a BJJ base. I know he's spread his wings and he's trained and he's learned a lot of knowledge and he's become a more complete mixed martial artist. But what's his biggest victory that he ever had? It was pulling off a sub over Jordan Williams. Jordan Williams, a fighter that dissipated from the UFC very quickly, snuck a knockout over Gregory Rodriguez somehow in Dana White's Contender Series. But I mean, what are we talking about here? The Sage Northcutt one, maybe. You could talk about he sub Sage. Sage was very young and green at the time and a little bit one-dimensional. And I just have my question marks about Mickey Gall. I'm not sure if he's really a UFC caliber fighter. I will give him credit in his last fight against Bassil Hafez, the fight we were just talking about. He actually kept that fight somewhat competitive, and that was a sign maybe he's developing. He's still under 30 years old. To me, Brahimaj is a fighter that has a lot more potential if he could actually put it together. He does some things well. I think he's a solid grappler. You take a look at all 10 of his victories. All of them have come by way of sub. Okay, I think he's been competitive on the grappling scene as well. I mean, he has some solid skills there. What he went out there and did to my boy Sasha Palatnikov in the first round, I wasn't happy to see that. If you guys don't know, Sasha Palatnikov, a friend of mine. But I thought that was impressive. He showed what he's capable of doing when he has confidence in himself, right? In that fight, I don't know why all of a sudden he's just charging forward, but we've seen him be very hesitant throughout his UFC career, and the numbers correlate to exactly what you see on tape, just landing 1.74 strikes per minute with his stand-up. I mean, that's not a good sign. You can't really have faith in him to win decisions when he's not putting out enough volume. Mickey Gall is a fighter. We saw in his last fight, his striking's coming around. He's going to be the much more aggressive fighter here. And if this fight does go to a decision, you got to almost favor that Gall gets that victory. But, even though I'm talking bad about the volume that Brahimaj puts out there, I don't think his striking's necessarily horrendous. He's a fighter that actually has technical boxing, right? His hands are tight. They're crisp. He throws some nice hooks and whatnot. He just doesn't let the volume go. If he had more confidence in himself, I think that he could actually have success there. And then you mix that with his grappling. I think, like I said, he's a fighter that shows to have a lot more potential than a Mickey Gall. And I'm gonna put some faith in Brahimaj here. We'll get to the betting line here in 1 second. I'll let you guys know right now. It's basically pick 'em odds. I'm gonna put some faith in Brahimaj putting it together. what's tricky about this is that Mickey Gall's a fighter that's never been subbed, and are you relying on Brahimaj to get that sub? I think he can win a decision, but he has to mix it all up together, has to step on the gas a little bit with his striking, but I think he could also have some success with the grappling here. Even if he doesn't get that sub, maybe he has some control time, uses his solid BJJ to control and transition around there. And Mickey Gall is a fighter that's vulnerable to being touched up, and he's also a fighter that's vulnerable to being finished. And you take a look at the numbers here. You guys know I never like seeing these types of numbers, even though Brahimaj has a similar type of thing going on there. But Mickey Gall absorbing 4.55 compared to the 3.33. Okay, absorbing, slightly over an entire strike more. And he's shown to have durability issues. We've seen Mickey Gall knocked out. I saw it live. I was there live for his fight against the Canadian who's back in the win column there, and Mikey Malott. I saw that fight. I was really cage side for that fight. I know I throw that around sometimes because I get some good seats here and there, as you guys will see, but I was really cage side for that fight, and I saw Mikey Malott starch him in the first round. So I do believe that Mickey Gall has some vulnerabilities there. Maybe he gets caught with the left hook. Maybe we see him knocked out with him being overly aggressive, and Brahimaj sits back and counters him with a nice hook. Maybe we see a club and sub. Maybe we see Mickey sub for the first time ever, but I do believe Mickey is vulnerable to being finished, and that 7-6 doesn't look that well. I know that the 10-5 is not the best look either, but I'm going to put some faith in the Fortis product here and Ramiz Brahimaj. He has a victory over my boy Sasha, so I'll give him some credit there. But like I said, pick 'em odds on this fight. Pick your poison. I'm going to settle in with the fighter who has more potential, and if he puts it all together, should get the W. But I don't say it with a lot of confidence, man. Be careful. Be careful if Mickey is just a fighter that's just coming out like a bat out of hell and just gets the better of the volume, and Ramiz is hesitant once again. So not a lot of confidence in the pick. Give me Ramiz Brahimaj. So this will be interesting. I don't have a betting line available on this fight, and not to toot my own horn, but I've been predicting these opening betting odds very accurately on fights that we preview where I don't have a line available. This was a fight that was just put together. Jhonata Diniz is taking on the number 9 ranked heavyweight fighter, Marcin Tybura. Diniz was supposed to be fighting 2 weeks prior to when this fight takes place. He was supposed to be facing off with Derek Lewis. And listen, there was a lot of respect on his betting line against Derek Lewis. He was the favorite in that spot. If you guys caught my preview for that fight, I don't have an extreme amount of faith in Diniz. I know that he is a high-level striker. That's for sure. He's really shown to bring over that kickboxing experience into the MMA cage and make it work well. But I think that he's shown to be lacking with his grappling quite a bit. And we even saw it in his recent fight against Carl Williams. When Carl Williams finally closed the distance and used to implement those tactics, he had success. Carl Williams won the 3rd round. You take a look at the Austin Lane fight. Austin Lane had success getting a takedown there in the 1st round. He broke down in the 2nd. But you see that there's something to be worked on there. You have to have question marks about his grappling. He isn't proven there. And that's a problem when you're facing a fighter like Marcin Tybura, who is a well-rounded fighter. He can strike with you. He's vulnerable to being hit with big shots. That's one thing that's not going his way here, because Diniz is live to get a knockout on him. But Marcin Tybura is a fighter that can try to walk through those types of strikes, land his own, and get you down to the mat and have success there. Now, in the Sergey Spivak fight, he gets the early takedown, which was exactly what I thought would happen throughout that fight. I was on Tybura in that fight. I was feeling very good about the beginning, the first minute of that fight. I believe that Tybura was actually the last official play I had on that fight card for it to be a clean sweep. So I was really happy going into that, caught him at dog odds, but somehow he fell into an armbar. But just understand that Sergey Spivak is a young fighter that shows to have a lot more talent down in the mat than a Diniz. So if Tybura falls into that type of situation, I don't see anything happening like that. Diniz isn't pulling off an armbar. I think that Tybura will really control him down in the mat and will look to maybe even find a finish. Marcin Tybura has had his fair share of subs and finishes down in the mat. Prior to the Spivak fight, he subbed Tai Tuivasa in the 1st round. That was another fight where we favored him there. I mean, listen, this is one of those types of fights where if you're looking at it, if you're going against Diniz, you're saying, okay, well, if I lose the fight, it's not going to play out well. You may just get brutally knocked out, but it's still just a loss. Okay, when you're analyzing this fight as a whole, if you get brutally knocked out or you lose a decision, it's the same thing. And this is a fight where I feel that Diniz is probably going to open up as the favorite based off the respect that was put next to his name going into that Lewis fight. I think the value is going to be on the veteran here in Tybura. Yeah, maybe he gets knocked out, but if he doesn't get flash KO'd and he survives that as this fight progresses, I mean, he's going to have success with the grappling. I think he's live to even get a finish down on the mat. I mean, there's that type of potential. Tybura may just prove to be on another level down there. Tybura is a fighter that has had 12 finishes out of his 25 victories. A lot of ground and pound going on there too. And he's had his fair share of knockouts. So maybe he can make something happen like that down there. But he's shown evolution with his grappling. We talked about the recent sub he just had. And just Diniz is unproven, man. He's unproven. I'm going to say the value is going to be in the dog. Tybura here. His stock's a little low coming off a loss and that last fight where he made that mistake. Like I said, though, Diniz isn't pulling off an armbar. He's not doing nothing on him down in the mat. Diniz has to get that flash KO. He will be live to do that. But I think the value will be on the veteran here. I'll take the route of the grappler over the striker. Okay, that's the route I'm going here. And just real quick, man, Tybura, let's not forget, before that sub loss, he was putting in some work. Yeah, he got knocked out by Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall, in my opinion, the best heavyweight on planet Earth right now. I mean, look at these victories, man. Victories over Alexander Romanov, Blagoy Ivanov, Tai Tuivasa. The loss to Alexander Volkov, another extremely high-level fighter. Before that, he was on a hell of a win streak. Already had a victory over Sergey Spivak prior. Victories over Ben Rothwell, Walt Harris, Hardy, Grisham. Yeah, you could say some of these fighters haven't been the most consistent throughout the years, but you still got to like the W's that he's been putting on throughout his career. Man, there's been some solid winning streaks going on and whatnot. Maybe not the highest level of fighters. I'm not saying Tybura is the highest level of fighter, but he has an avenue of victory here. I'm going to say that this fight opens up with Diniz. Maybe I'm wrong here. I'm going to say Diniz opens up and even settles around like a minus 170 favorite, 150 to 1. Maybe I'm giving you a little widespread prediction here, but like 150 to 190, maybe right in the middle, 170, somewhere around there. I think the respect's going to be put on Diniz's name. I like the dog value where you might be able to grab Tybura right around a plus 135 or so. I would be on the side of him, and I'm picking him to win the fight. Does he get a finish down on the mat? I'm going to say he wins a decision, but he can get a finish down there, man. I think, especially if he has success early with the takedowns, he will have a lot of time to try to find that finish down there, and we really might see Diniz be a fish out of water. Although when Carl Williams was on him at the end of the third, he did enough to survive, but Williams didn't really know what he was doing as far as looking for a finish down there. He wasn't really on point. The finish is possible down the mat, but I'll go decision for Tybura using that grappling. In the lightweight division, we got two OGs of the fight game. Take a look at the amount of experience both these fighters have. Jim Miller with 55 professional fights, still putting in work up in his 40s. Damon Jackson, you got to respect his resume too. Came into the UFC a little bit later in his career, but he's had some success in the octagon. This is a fighter that has 31 professional fights, put in work over in the PFL and whatnot. Has had a lot of success with his grappling throughout the years. The same can be said about Jim Miller, but Jim Miller to me is a fighter that is shown to be more diverse, even later in his career, really putting his striking together. If you're a newer fan of the sport and you don't really understand what Jim Miller is about, understand that Jim Miller lived in the top 15 back in the day. He's a fighter that's very similar to like a Donald Cerrone, okay, a fighter that's always gone out there and performed, has a crazy amount of performance bonuses, and just lived in the top 15, just was never a fighter that was able to get over that hump and really break into the top of the division. But Jim Miller is not just some journeyman fighter that's hung on to his UFC career for a long time. We're talking about a fighter that was really once supreme in this division. I'm telling you guys, he was a problem back in the day. What's crazy about Jim Miller is the late success that he has had, being 41 years old now. But as of recently, let's forget about the painful UFC 300 performance. Everybody wanted Jim to win. Maybe not everybody, because a lot of people have love for Bobby Green, but it would have been crazy if Jim Miller would have had that victory on UFC 100, at UFC 200, and then UFC 300. But he got beat up by Bobby. He was bloodied up. You had to love the toughness he showed in that fight. Never looked for a way out. I mean, that's the type of fighter that he is. I mean, he hung in there, took a lot of damage. But look at what he's been doing as of recently. He's going out there and he's facing these younger fighters, and he's just completely outclassing them. What he did to Jesse Butler, that was one of the most phenomenal knockouts that I've seen in a long time. Took just 23 seconds, getting that sub over a tough and dangerous Gabriel Benitez. He lost to Alexander Hernandez. That was a fight that a lot of us had him winning, which was kind of a shame that he didn't get the nod there. Sub Donald Cerrone, knocked out Nicholas Mota, another fighter that was younger and shows to be dangerous at times. Knocked out Eryk Gonzalez, not extremely high in him, but still, when you see an old man going out there starching these young bucks, it's a sight to see, man. Sub Roosevelt Roberts back in the day. I mean, just, you have to really admire the success that he's been having being as old as he is. And I really do believe he still has a little bit left to give the game. And there's not a lot of fighters that are in their 40s that could have success in the UFC. And Jim Miller is just one of those types of fighters. Both these fighters are high-level grapplers. The difference to me is that Jim Miller is a fighter that shows to be more diverse. I think Miller can get the better of those striking exchanges. Damon Jackson is very stiff. We've seen him hurt consistently in his fights. Out of 7 of his losses, he's been knocked out 4 times, and some of them were brutal. I'll scroll right down to this fight that took place over in the PFL against Movlid Kabulov. That knockout was one of the most phenomenal knockouts I've ever seen. He timed the flying knee, and it wasn't one of those flying knees where he's jumping into it. He just sat back and let Damon Jackson run right into it. It looked like you were watching something from the Matrix. It was crazy. Of course, Elliott Topuria brutally knocks him out in the first round. Don't get me starting to chirp about my boy Topuria there. But even in the Dan Argueta fight, fighting an undersized Argueta who has low-level striking, Argueta could have almost got that knockout, had horrible fight IQ there, went to the wrestling when he had him hurt on the feet. You think of the Alexander Hernandez fight, he had him hurt there. The type of fighter that Jackson is he gets hurt on the feet. He tries to push through with his pace and his grappling. It's high level. If you're low level there, he's going to break you. He's just going to push through all that, and he's going to ragdoll you. He's not the most exciting fighter, but he has success doing what he does. I just think that Jim Miller can handle all that. Jim Miller, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He's a crafty fighter. We've seen him struggle a little bit at times with his takedown defense, but all in all, I think he could stifle that type of attack, get the better of the striking. I think this is a bounce back spot for Jim Miller. I do believe that. And let's take a look at the betting line here, because I am going to be siding with Jim Miller. This line, essentially pick him depending on the sports book you're looking at. I have seen Jim Miller as an underdog on quite a few books, so technically I'm siding with the dog. He's a -110 here on BetUS, very minuscule underdog, if you will, if you even want to call it that. It's essentially pick 'em odds. I'm going to side with the legend and future Hall of Famer, Jimbo Miller. And I'll say he gets, did I pick him to get the knockout? Sorry, guys. I know you're waiting on that. I'll say he gets a finish. Why not? I'll give the old timer one more opportunity to get another highlight reel knockout. He's been doing that type of work in the cage, even as of recently. Okay? Remember, we talked about that phenomenal knockout he had over that poor boy who made his UFC debut there on short notice. But Damon Jackson's a good fighter, but when it comes to striking and his striking defense, he's a low-level fighter. I think there will be an opportunity for Miller to crack him with the shot. I think Miller's going to be very motivated for a bounce-back victory here after that, the way he was slopped up against Bobby Green. Give me Miller to get that TKO finish, that knockout. This is a tough spot for Jonathan Martinez here, ranked number 13th in the bantamweight division, taking on Marcus McGhee, a fighter that's looking to put a number next to his name real quick. Jonathan Martinez was coming into that Jose Aldo fight with a lot of momentum behind him. Got to give him some credit for the victory over Said Nurmagomedov, but I did believe that he lost that fight, so a little bit of a gift there, but was able to follow that up with the big victory over Adrian Yanez, showcasing the leg kicking ability that he has. He has some of the best leg kicks, the best calf kicks in the game. He'll chop you down there. But Jose Aldo showed to be a step ahead of him, out-volumed him, just landed the much cleaner strikes, and he has that setback now. And then getting matched up with a fighter like Marcus McGhee, who doesn't have the biggest name in the game. I have him as one of the better kept secrets in the fight game. I think that he is very high level. You take a look at the fact that he just has 10 professional fights mixed with his age. That has a little something to do with the fact that people aren't so well read up on McGhee. But after he goes out here and gets a victory over Martinez, who's in the top 15, and now you're talking about McGhee being 1, 2, 3, 4-0 in the UFC, and there's a very likely possibility he gets another highlight reel type of finish, because that's what he does. I mean, you take a look at the victory he's coming off against Gaston Bolanos. That was a brutal KO victory. Knocked out JP Bays before that. Came into the UFC, got the rear naked choke victory over Journey Newsome. I mean, he's a fight finisher. He's a phenomenal athlete. He does a little bit more than just fight. If you follow him on IG, I mean, you'll see this is a dude that's at the skate park. He's doing all types of wild acrobatic type of stuff, and you'll see him mix in these spinning attacks into his fight game. Comes in phenomenal shape. I mean, you see him here hitting the spinning kicks and whatnot, and he will definitely implement that in the cage, as we saw him do against Gaston Bolanos, a fighter that's known for throwing his own spinning attack. So McGhee has superior confidence in himself when he's in there, and this is going to be an interesting fight, man. Southpaw versus southpaw. I think McGhee gets the better of the striking attack. You're going to see Martinez try to implement those calf kicks, but when he's just throwing those out there, I see McGhee countering him and landing more impactful strikes throughout this fight. McGhee's well-rounded too. We talked about how he had that sub in his first UFC fight. He's also put up 100% takedown defensive rate in the octagon. So good luck if Martinez wants to try to use some of his grappling skills to get this fight down to the mat when he doesn't want to deal with the striking. Take a look at the striking numbers here. McGhee landing 5.43 strikes per minute while only absorbing 2.52. Martinez with the 4.5 strikes landed per minute while absorbing 3.87. Not bad numbers, but McGhee showing to really be superior there, even though it's been against lower level competition. I think he's going to take those numbers and keep that going against the step up in competition here in Martinez. I think that he has a way higher ceiling than a Martinez, and I'm high on Marcus McGhee. He's already put money in my pocket. The one thing that I'm not crazy about is the fact that he's 34 years old, as he's just getting the ball rolling in the octagon. But when you take a look at the shape that he comes into the cage, and I think that this is a fighter that could have a lot of late success in this division, which these lower weight classes, you don't typically see that. But we were just talking about Jim Miller. I think that Marcus McGhee can do something similar late in age. And he also doesn't have a lot of mileage on him. Hasn't taken a lot of damage. Only has 10 pro fights at the age of 34. I think he has a lot left to give the game. And I will take Marcus McGhee by finish. That's all he does. You take a look at his 9 victories, 8 KOs, 1 sub. That 1 sub coming in the UFC. Jonathan Martinez has been knocked out twice. I'm going to say Marcus McGhee gets the knockout. He's just so dangerous there. I will say that McGhee gets another knockout. This is a fight where the line is very close. People still have a lot of respect for Jonathan Martinez. You can get McGhee right now at a -120. This fight is essentially pick-em odds, very minuscule lean towards McGhee's way. I will side with McGhee. I'll pick my poison with Marcus McGhee, and I say he gets that finish. There's been a lot of legend talk going on this week. And how about Chris Weidman? Legend in his own right, one of the greatest middleweights to ever have done it. A fighter that put a little bit of a damper on what one of the top 5 pound-for-pound GOATs, Anderson Silva, was doing back in the day. Of course, knocked him out. That was one of the craziest fights I've ever witnessed. And then how about when he checks the kick, breaks Silva's leg, and then how ironic and crazy is it that Weidman eventually sustains a similar type of injury. I mean, it's crazy. An injury that we very rarely see in the octagon. I hate watching those kind of injuries, man. I have to turn away when I'm looking at that. But Chris Weidman's taking on Eryk Anders here, a fight taking place in the middleweight division. Chris Weidman is 40 years old now. You have to understand, though, Chris Weidman is built differently. And he's coming off controversial decision victory over Bruno Silva. A lot of people thought he should have lost that fight. All the eye pokes going on and whatnot. It was crazy. The thing that I liked that Weidman showed in that fight, man, is that he has so much fight in him, okay? And when you have a fighter like that, he can get involved in these ugly type of fights. He has that wrestling background. I mean, he's just mentally built so differently. I think that leg injury has even made him more mentally durable. This is a fighter that's willing to do anything to get the job done. We saw him even in that return fight against Brad Tavares. He was injured again. He injured his knee again, and a different type of injury, but was still pushing through and made that fight competitive with the injury. And Brad Tavares, I know I've been a little down on him as of recently, but he looked all right in his last fight. And Weidman's a scrappy dude, and I think that he has a lot of potential to go out here and get a W against a fighter in Eryk Anders, who's also up there in age. He's 37 years old, and Anders has been a little hesitant in there. Comes off a victory over Jamie Pickett, a very low-level fighter. Before that, lost to Marc-Andre Barriol, knocked out Kyle Dawkins before that. He's been involved in a lot of grappling matches throughout all this as well. But I think that Chris Weidman is live to go out here and just use his heart and his superior mindset to go out here and take a W over the younger fighter. But just note again, Eryk Anders isn't that young either. Chris Weidman, a 40-year-old Chris Weidman is like a 37 or 36-year-old Eryk Anders, in my opinion. I don't know. I interviewed Eryk Anders back in the day, if you guys remember, on MMA Live Discussion. I don't know this to be fact, but I think Eryk Anders is a guy that kind of enjoys himself. I know he surrounds himself with some people that like to enjoy themselves and whatnot. And Chris Weidman, to me, seems more like a straight-edge kind of guy. You think about his circle, right? His brother-in-law, Stephen Thompson. I think that these guys just live and breathe the fight game. And I think Weidman's more hungry to get a W here. And you take a Chris Weidman when he was in his peak, it's so much superior than Eryk Anders at his peak. And I'm going to say Weidman has a little bit left to give the game. Also note, he's had more time to get confidence and coming back from that injury. So he may even look better now than he looked in his last 2 fights, even though he's gotten older. Okay, so that's something you have to keep an eye on there. And I take a look at some numbers here, if you will. A lot has changed. A lot of these stats come from fights that took place a long time ago. But I'm going to side with Chris Weidman to do enough to get a decision victory. I think he pushes through. And we've seen some flaky performances from Anders before. We've seen him go out there and not really mentally be in the fight. And Weidman is just, he is very mentally tough. So Chris Weidman is a plus 150, or excuse me, opened up as a plus 150 dog on BetUS. And he is now a plus 140 with some slight action coming in on him. I wouldn't be surprised if this line continues to close and this fight closes to be more close to even odds. I wouldn't be surprised there. People, if they see Weidman leading up to the fight, he's looking to be in phenomenal shape and has a spirits high and looks to be very motivated. I would not be surprised if we see this line close a bit. And I like the value on the dog and Chris Weidman, the former middleweight champion, a fighter that has proved a lot more throughout the years and a fighter that is just built differently. I'll say Weidman wins a decision. Hey guys, real quick, I know this episode is rolling, but if you could, please just like this video for me, guys. Pause for a second, like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're new here, it means so much to me, guys. Go follow me on my social media. I'm on IG and Twitter. It's scrolling below. You're going to see it scrolling by your face 1,000 times. If you guys could do that for me, it really helps me take my product over here, my show, to the next level. And I really have a lot more I want to do than just what's going on now. I cannot wait to show you what's on the horizon here, but I need your help to get this ball rolling for me, guys. All right. I appreciate you greatly. If anyone wants to work with me for my official plays, also reach out to me. I'll give you further information there. I appreciate you guys more than you know. We now head up to the main card. And just a side note, we do have some big time favorites scattered throughout these next 5 fights. So we will clearly dive into some specific method of victory and some prop bets. As Mauricio Ruffy is a big time favorite over James Jhonata. Mauricio Ruffy, a fighter coming out of the Fighting Nerds team who has been having a crazy amount of success. And there's been fighters coming out of there that are really making a run in their divisions. When it's all said and done, Mauricio, he may be the best out of all of them. Time will tell. It's hard to say, but he moves differently in there. When you're seeing all these high-level fighters that are very respected in the sport, raving about the work that he's doing and the way that Mauricio moves differently, you know that there's something to that. Okay, everyone's talking about how this guy moves and the work he puts in the gym. There's been a lot of comparisons to Conor McGregor when he made his run. Love him or hate him, I know not everyone's a big McGregor fan, but if you really take a look at what he was doing when he was on his run, he was moving differently in there. He was getting these knockouts, just being so unorthodox and just bringing a new little twist into the fight game. And you see a lot of that in Mauricio. Mauricio is a huge fan of McGregor's. You could tell if you follow his IG. I mean, he's definitely a big fan of McGregor's, and I'm sure he's watched a lot of tape and he's practiced a lot of those types of movements and whatnot. And he's going to be the fighter moving on a completely different wavelength here. James Jhonata is a fighter that has really relied on his toughness and durability to get victories throughout his pro career thus far. Jhonata, with 18 professional fights at 25 years old, still has never been knocked out, which is interesting because Ruffy has had 8 knockouts out of his 10 victories. In fact, I'm sure all of them were via knockout. 2 were other unknown method of victories. I'm willing to bet those were knockouts. I mean, he's an absolute knockout artist, so something has to give here. I do believe that Llontop has a solid chin, but I don't believe that he's the most defensively sound. And when you're playing this type of game, even though everyone's saying how these new fight gloves don't translate to a lot of knockouts, I still think when you're talking about a fighter like Ruffy, you're going to see a very high likelihood that you're going to see a knockout in there against a fighter that even is as durable. I think he's playing with fire. His UFC debut against Chris Padilla was not a good look for him either. Showed to be lacking down on the mat. You could say his bounce back fight against Slava, which he lost, you could still say, okay, you could give him some credit for looking a little bit sharper in there overall, but still a fight that he took an L in. I think that Mauricio is just going to be on a different wavelength here. I mean, I'll cut to the chase. I think there's even a possibility that we see Mauricio get his first ever professional submission. Maybe he hurts him, gets him down to the mat, pulls off a sub. We've seen Llontop sub twice out of his 4 losses. I think he's limited down there. He needs to grow. He's 25 years old. There's room for growth for sure. But right now, I think that with the circle that Mauricio Ruffy keeps around him, I expect him to just be way more prepared for this spot. And Mauricio is just 28 years old, has a limited amount of UFC experience as well. They're similar in some senses. I just think that Mauricio is way more prepared here, and he's deserving of being as big of a favorite as he is. I just think that he's going to deliver for some time. I think he's going to make a run in this division. You guys got to understand this is a fighter that has some serious potential. He's as high as a 9-1 favorite. He's around a minus 900. You're going to find a minus 750 to minus 900. He's a huge favorite. And I'm not going to point you the other way. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to try to talk about how that line's so high and ridiculous. I think that Not only does Mauricio Ruffy win this fight, I think that he finds the finish. He'll have those situations to land big shots and to mix things up and show the growth in his game. And I think that he gets James out of there. I'm gonna say he gets the knockout, even though we've seen James Llontop subbed when he's getting finished and he's shown to be durable. I think that this is going to be the first ever knockout loss that he takes. When you're in there with a guy that moves like Mauricio, something's going to happen. And I think it's going to be a spectacular type of finish. I think he's going to drop him, hurt him with something, maybe follows him down to the mat, and we see a TKO type of finish. I'm not sure if it's like that flush, one-shot KO strike, but I think that he hurts him and he follows him down to the mat and gets that finish there. So give me Mauricio Ruffy to get the finish. So you're targeting him with maybe you're targeting an under 1.5 in this fight. Maybe you're targeting Mauricio to win this fight via KO. See what kind of lines you could chop there. But I do like him to get the job done inside the distance. Action taking place in the women's flyweight division. We have Karine Silva at number 11 taking on the number 9, Viviane Araujo. Viviane, 37 years old now. Still looks to be in phenomenal shape when she steps into the cage. She takes good care of herself. She's a fighter that has showcased to have some good pop and some solid striking. Karine Silva, a fighter that really has some tricks up her sleeve with her grappling. I do have her as an above average grappler. We've seen her go out there and sub fighters like Ketlin Souza, who just had a big bounce back victory as of recently. She came in as a huge dog, had a victory there. She subbed Marina Moroz, who's a fighter that has her own grappling skill set. So she shows skills. Sub Poliana Botello, had a submission victory on Dana White's Contender Series where she got the contract against Jan. And I think that she's really always live to get a sub. When you take a look at the line of work that she's been doing as of recently, you have to look at her as a fight finisher. What's interesting here is that Viviane has never been subbed as a pro. So she's been very technically sound at avoiding those types of situations. If she can keep this fight standing, Viviane will be live for sure. I mean, this could be a fight that plays out relatively close. I like some of the development that we've seen from Karine, but I wouldn't say that she's an extremely polished and finished product as far as her striking goes, but she puts it together well. She has a lot of confidence when she's in there. She kind of tends to be the bully when she's in the cage, and I just expect her to be a step ahead of a very aging Viviane, who's, 37 years old. I mean, she's getting up there. And then you got this prime 30-year-old Karine. I definitely favor Silva to get the better of this fight. I think that I'm kind of favoring a decision victory. We take a look at some of the work that Araujo's been doing. She comes off that tough loss against Natalia Silva. Silva is the real deal. Before that, she had a victory over Jennifer Maia, who she lost her UFC contract. She's fighting over an Invicta now, but Jennifer Maia is not a bad fighter. She's a proven fighter. That was a big W for her there. You take a look at the level of talent that she's losing against. It's very high level, losing to Amanda Ribas, Alexa Grasso, Caitlin Chukogian. And these are good fighters, and she's still sneaking in her occasional Ws if you're going back to 2020. Victories over Montana De La Rosa, Matafari. We talked about the Maia victory. All in all, let me just cut to the chase here. I think that Karine mixes it up better, and she's just the bully in there. I think that she's the fighter that is going to be expecting to get the better of whatever they're doing in there, whether it's going down to the mat or even trading, working in the clinch. I think that Karine is going to be expecting to get the better of those situations, and you're going to see Araujo kind of fall in line with that, and she'll get pushed around a little bit. And Karine, even though Karine is a fighter that's going to have, if you will, a 1-inch reach disadvantage, she has a slightly smaller reach, and she's an inch slightly taller. I think that she'll actually play to be the more solid fighter, more than if you're just looking at the numbers. I mean, she's pretty thick. She's kind of stout in there, and it's going to play out like that. Give me Karine Silva to get a decision victory. Viviane has proven to be hard to get out of there, and I don't think that Silva finds that sub, so it leads me to that decision victory for Silva. The Prodigy looks to step down into the octagon once again. Bo Nickal will be taking on Paul Craig. Fight taking place in the middleweight division. If you guys didn't already know, I'm a huge fan of Bo Nickal, and I'm very excited to see how far he's going to push it in the fight game. I know a lot of you guys don't like him. I see the hatred coming in every time that there's a Bo Nickal fight card, and we could dive into why that's the case, man. A lot of you guys are haters. Haters gonna hate. People want to say, oh, Bo Nickal should be fighting 4 to 5 times a year. We need to see him get thrown in there with the highest of level fighters right off the rip when he's only 5-0, 4-0, and has barely been training mixed martial arts He's been training for just a couple years, but we want to see him fight 4 or 5 times against top 10, top 5 fighters so we could see him get knocked out. We don't want to see the UFC do the right thing and groom him the right way with his beautiful wrestling pedigree and background and just the athlete that he is. Let's not groom him the right way and have him make a healthy run in this sport and help take the sport to another level, right? As we start to get a lot more American wrestlers coming over to MMA, following his lead. Let's not do it that way, because I'm an ugly hater. You know, the whole Bo Nickal situation has some similarities to what Caitlin Clark has been doing over in the WNBA when they didn't allow her to be part of that Olympic team. I see a lot of that hater type of atmosphere when you're talking Caitlin Clark or Bo Nickal, and that has to do with them just having superior potential. And Caitlin Clark should have been able to play for that team. If you really dove into the numbers, and even the people that said that she shouldn't have, when it was all said and done and they looked back at it, they actually understood that they were wrong. There was players that qualified for that team that actually statistically were a lower level value than a Caitlin Clark, besides the fact that Caitlin Clark brought all the attention and the eyes to watching the national team and would have grown the sport. But it was more than that. Caitlin Clark, you look at her numbers, breaking all the rookie statistics. She was a player that should have been on that team. And there's just some similarities going on with Caitlin Clark and Bo Nickal, in my opinion. You guys just want to throw tar and feathers over at Bo Nickal the same way you see it for Clark. You guys got to accept it, man. Bo Nickal is great for the sport. You know, I'm talking to you guys in this sense, and I say this as a friend with you guys listening here. I've noticed in my life, whenever I'm doing something that is a little bit more successful and things are starting to get rolling, you always notice that you see those ugly haters come in just a little bit more, okay? Understand who those people are. Point them out. We see them in the comment section under some of my videos here. Understand that's a sign of you doing good things, okay? Bo Nickal is the prodigy, and he has potential to make a ridiculous run. This is a little bit of a premature statement, but he has the potential to be one of the GOATs of the fight game. He's just 28 years old. We haven't seen fighters come into MMA with the wrestling abilities that he has and then intertwine it so quickly in other aspects of the game. I mean, as soon as he turned pro as a fighter, you see him landing nasty boxing knockouts. The submissions that he was pulling off in Dana White's Contender Series, I mean, flowing to his back, slapping on triangles like that. You don't see wrestlers doing that. Okay, when you think about the victory he had over Zach Borrego, he had 2 solid victories on Dana White's Contender Series, also sub Donovan Beard. And we've seen him come into the octagon and implement those types of tactics too. The knockout he had over Val Woodburn, he's willing to stand in the fire, land knockouts like that. But understand, as time progresses, this is a fighter that's going to go to his wrestling. He's going to dig deep, and he's going to get a lot of victories like that. He's going to break guys. He's going to ragdoll them. Enlighten you how high level his wrestling is. He's a 3-time Division I national champ. The one year he fell short, he came in second there. He almost represented the country and could have potentially made a run at becoming a gold medalist in the Olympics. Had a hell of a run as he was trying to qualify. Had victories over Carter Starocci. He also had a victory over Pat Downey, and Valencia was another wrestler that he beat as he was trying to qualify. And then he eventually faced off with a teammate of his, David Taylor, who David Taylor defeated him. And then David Taylor made a run and won the gold medal in that Olympic run there. So, I mean, just to understand, if he would have defeated David Taylor, I mean, he could have took it all in the Olympics. I mean, this is just, don't think of him as a guy that's just a collegiate wrestler. This is a wrestler that has the level to medal in the Olympics. Stylistically, I love this fight for him as well. He has the wrestling to negate going down to the mat with Paul Craig, who has shown to be very tricky. I hope Bo Nickal will fight an intelligent fight here, try to keep this fight standing. I think he could starch Paul Craig. We've seen Paul Craig knocked out numerous times. Paul Craig's been knocked out in 5 of his 8 total losses, the majority of his losses coming by way of knockout. And don't even be surprised if Bo hurts him and then it potentially gets a sub on him as well, because he's showing rapid development there. We've seen Paul Craig subbed in two times out of his 8 losses. He's been subbed more than he's lost decisions, right? He's not a fighter that really just will sit back and coast to a loss. Paul Craig is going to look to press to action, and he's vulnerable to being finished. I think Bo Nickal should find a finish in this fight one way or another, but I do think it's going to be by way of landing that knockout. We talked about some of the quick work that he's been doing. He's fought 5 times in the last 2 years. A lot of you guys want to see that number be double what it is, but as I said earlier, I don't think that that's the right way to groom him at just 28 years old. Let him learn the overall fight game before you give him those high-level fighters, okay? Let him learn this whole thing out. He's been looking great in there. He just subbed Cody Brundage, knocked out Val Woodburn, subbed Jamie Pickett. This is a step up in competition, man. Paul Craig's a tricky dude, has a world of experience. It's kind of weird. I remember Paul Craig was talking about how he was going to retire from the sport like 2-3 years ago when he was on quite a winning streak, actually, too. It was very strange. He said, he was going to have like 1 or 2 more fights and he was going to retire. I think it was by the end of 2022. Here we are cruising into 2025 and he's still fighting. So I don't know what the deal with that whole thing was. Maybe it was some negotiations as far as a contract went. All signs are pointing towards him being fully involved in the fight game. And Paul Craig is known for getting those huge upsets. We definitely got to bring this up. He's known for going in there and getting victories over fighters that have huge potential, right? Championship caliber fighters, right? I mean, some of them are former champions, right? Had that knockout over Jamal Hill, TKO victory, had that chicken wing dangling around as he had him locked up in that triangle. Had a submission over a very high level Nikita Krylov. But let's not overlook the victory that he had over Magomed Ankalaev, which you guys know I'm very high on Magomed Ankalaev. He was getting dominated throughout that fight, but slapped on the triangle with just 1 second left to go. That was a learning experience for Ankalaev. But Paul Craig has snuck off these types of victories. Can he put a name like Bo Nickal in his resume? That'd be crazy, right? To be the first guy to ever defeat Bo Nickal, the prodigy. I just don't see it happening. Also note, Bo Nickal, not only is he just a wrestler, but he's a wrestler that quickly dove into the grappling scene, right? He's been participating in a lot of high-level BJJ matches with high-level grapplers, with the best of grapplers, right? He's rolling around with the king, Gordon Ryan. So I just don't think that Paul Craig will have him like a fish out of water as they play around down there. I think Bo Nickal will be able to stifle, defend, and dominate and land big strikes. I will just say this real quick before we get to the betting line. One thing I wasn't crazy about seeing was that, but what do I know? But I didn't like the fact that Bo Nickal went back to Pennsylvania and looked to establish that American top team up there. I would have liked to have seen him really putting the bulk of his training down in Coconut Creek with all the faces that are down there. I would have liked to have seen that. And, when we first started seeing Bo Nickal introduced to the MMA scene, we saw him as a training partner of Jorge Masvidal's and fighters like that over there. I liked him to keep those people around him. I don't really know the bodies that he fully has up in Pennsylvania. I know he's kind of cross-training and whatnot, and I'm sure he'll establish that scene. And he'll do wonders up there. I'm sure he'll get a lot of high-level wrestlers from Penn State to come in over there. I'm excited to see all that. But I have mixed feelings on that whole situation. But regardless, I think he'll be prepared for this situation. I'm very excited for this fight, as you guys could see. Hopefully you guys aren't too upset with some of the stuff I said here. Bo Nickal is a minus 1,000. He's a 10-1 favorite. As to be expected, he's always a huge favorite. And what do you guys want to do with that? I'm siding with Bo here. That line's crazy. What am I going to tell you? But you're going to be targeting unders for this. I think you want to look for Bo Nickal to get that KO/TKO. Think that he gets the knockout in this fight. That's what you need to dive into there. See if you see a line that's worth it. But I see him getting Paul Craig out of there. Paul Craig is just too flaky. He puts himself in positions to be finished, and Bo Nickal is a fight finisher. Bo Nickal, the prodigy. You guys are all haters. Here we go. We got the co-main event. Charles do Bronx Oliveira will be taking on Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler finally returning to the cage after being held hostage to that potential Conor McGregor fight. At first, I thought it was good for him. If you guys remember me, if you can follow me on Twitter, at the MMA Teller, on Instagram, at MMA Fortune Teller _ you probably heard me talking a little bit about the fact that I thought it was good that Chandler was taking a little bit of a layoff because he's taken a lot of damage. And I thought that he should have waited for that McGregor fight. Obviously, at this point in time, it's the right move to move on. You're not going to hold on anymore, but 2 years was kind of pushing it, but I do believe a nice year layoff was good for Chandler. Even though he was up in age, he's taken so much damage. When you look at how he was finished by Poirier, the fight with Gaethje was just outgunned in that fight, even though he landed his own shots and it was a very fun fight. He took so much damage in that fight, dating back to the Charles Oliveira fight where he was finished in the second round. Once again, they face off here. We'll circle back to that fight. We'll see what we could take away from the first time they fought there. But Chandler is such a fun fighter to watch. One of the real greats as far as entertainment goes in this fight game. You have to understand that. I've been a huge fan of his back from his Bellator days. I remember watching him make his Bellator debut. I wanted to see him in the UFC from way back then when he fought Eddie Alvarez the first time. Now, that fight was amazing. Had the wrestling background coming out of Missouri, mixed into boxing right away. He has big time power. He's always live to get a knockout, as we saw in his UFC debut against Dan Hooker, who's on his own tear right now. Now, the first time these two men fought, don't forget, it was Michael Chandler that had a lot of success early in that first round, and he almost finished Charles Oliveira. But in vintage fashion, Charles Oliveira weathered the storm, rose to his feet, and eventually landed his own big strike, right? Hit Chandler with a left hook there and got the finish. But if you just look at that fight and you're like, oh yeah, Charles got the better of him, he's going to get the better of him again, I think you're looking at it in the wrong light, because that fight could have been, in a snap of a finger, we could have had a different outcome. Okay, Chandler could have just landed a little bit more cleanly or did a little bit more damage and maybe got a stoppage. And we've seen Oliveira finished up like that in the past, right? Out of 10 of his losses, he's been finished in 8 of them. And even though he's one of the kingpins as far as his submission skills goes, he's also a fighter that's been subbed 5 times. So, I mean, when he gets hurt, don't even be surprised if a fighter like Chandler could snatch up a choke or something like that. I mean, it's not out of the realm. Okay, guys, I was on Charles Oliveira the first time around. I'm not going to switch my pick here. How can I switch my pick when he came through for me the last time? He's only 32 years old. He's been looking really good in the cage as of recently when you mix it all up. I know he's coming off the Arman Sarukian loss, but what he even did in that fight when he was in certain positions, you see how high level he is. Looked great against Beneil Dariush. Yeah, he lost to Islam Makhachev in the top 10 of the pound for pound GOAT rankings, in my opinion. If you guys caught my video, I mean, Islam's that type of fighter, whether you like him or not. So, but Charles is still hitting on all cylinders. He's so aggressive. He's more mentally durable now than he's ever been. Right? He knows what it takes to go through fire and come out with his hand raised. He did it against Chandler the first time. Got to say he does it again. You got to have question marks with the ring rust that Chandler will have. He's 38 years old. And as the fights progress, Chandler kind of gets outgunned against high-level fighters. He's always just a little bit of a step behind, right? Against Gaethje, DP, and some of those types of fighters. He kind of, I think it has a little bit to do with his size, the size disadvantage he has in there. He gets landed on a little bit easier. And you got to go with Charles Oliveira here. And I think you got to go with Charles to get a finish, because it's going to be that type of fight. It's going to be balls to the wall. I'm going to say that Oliveira gets a sub this time around. Okay, I know last time he did end up getting the TKO against Michael Chandler in the second round, in the very beginning of the second round, right? As soon as that second round kicked off, hit him with the left hook, I believe it was. And I think that this time somehow it goes down to the mat, and I think that he's leeching him up and sinking in a rear naked choke or something like that. He's just so high level down there. Maybe he hurts him first, but I'm going to go with the sub for Charles. Don't be shocked if you see a finish for Chandler, because it's going to be that type of fight off the rip right away. And Chandler, remember that front kick he landed on Tony Ferguson, the big jumping, the leaping left hook he landed against Dan Hooker? He's going to throw that out there. And Chandler also says that, take it for what you will, however you want to believe it, but he says that he's going to be the best version of himself that he's ever been. I like the confidence there, and I do believe that will translate into him having put in a crazy amount of effort and work into this training camp. So I think he will be somewhat prepared. I got Charles Oliveira, though. Charles opened up and is still currently a -250, a 2.5 to 1 favorite on BetUS, and I think it's somewhat understandable. It's a little bit high, but somewhat understandable. You got to be a little bit careful there, though. Coughing up 2.5 to 1 odds when you do have to understand that this is going to be crazy. That first round is going to be crazy. Charles will meet him. I'm not personally crazy about targeting that type of line. I guess if I have to make a decision here, I'm going to say the value is actually on Chandler, which you can get him right around 2 to 1 odds at plus 200. I got to say the value is on him. The more I really dive into that, have to make a decision here. I would like Oliveira more -200 and below to say that there's value on his line. But maybe you're targeting Charles to get that finish. Look at some of those prop bets there. The main event between Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic. What a legacy fight this is. I'm so excited for it. Now, this fight was supposed to take place a year ago, almost exactly to date. Jon Jones injures himself, tore his pec in a little grappling scenario with Dontel Mays. Please comment below. Let me know if you guys are as excited for this fight as I am, because I know not all of you are. A lot of people have turned the page on Stipe. This fight's been a little overshadowed by fighters like Alex Pereira and Tom Aspinall. People just think that Stipe is a wash, and he's 42 years old, which it's not as bad when you take into consideration this is the heavyweight division. Coming off a brutal knockout loss to Francis Ngannou. I mean, that's what happens when you sit there and trade with a fighter like Francis. He should have been changing levels. I was very disappointed in the tactics that he had in this fight. I think that Stipe has more to offer than a lot of you guys realize. Right? I already went on a tangent about how he's the greatest heavyweight of all time. I think that carries enough weight. Um, if this fight plays out, right, it's a 25-minute fight. If this fight plays out for the long haul, I think it's going to be a lot more competitive than a lot of you guys believe it to be. All right. Now, what Jon Jones just went out there and did to Ciryl Gane was phenomenal. I just don't see that happening to Stipe. Stipe is a fighter that has a wrestling base. He wrestled collegiately. He's a well-rounded fighter. Ciryl Gane is a fighter that is a very talented kickboxer, and he's very green with his grappling. He's kind of tricky with his sub skills, but doesn't have that wrestling ability. And I think that he let the lights hit him way too hard, and he just did not show up for that fight. I think Stipe is more game than that. Stipe is different, man. He's a different type of fighter. Stipe is the type of dude that you feel it from him when he's in there. Again, just willing to sit there and trade with Francis on the feet when that wasn't even the smart move to do. It's just that he has that type of confidence in himself. He's a guy that thinks he could take out anybody and in any type of fashion. And I don't think that the lights hit him that hard. I think he can defend takedowns from Jon Jones here. And on the feet, we've seen Jon Jones in a lot of competitive fights when those fights play out like that. I talked about this recently, but I mean, the Dominic Reyes fight, he was getting outpointed. He was hurt in the first 2 rounds. Dominic Reyes took his foot off the gas and blew that fight. A lot of people thought he still won that fight. The Thiago Santos fight was a fight that played out very closely. Well, Santos had torn ligaments in his legs. You think about the first fight that he had with Alexander Gustafsson. A lot of people thought that Gustafsson won that fight. That fight was one of the greatest fights we've ever seen. And of course, there was all the rumors about Jon Jones not even training for that fight and messing around, partying before it. But still, take it for what you will. If the fight plays out like that, and I'll also mention the OSP fight. That was another fight that played out extremely close when Jon Jones was coming off a long layoff, coming off a suspension for failed drug tests and all that. If this fight plays out like those types of fights, Stipe is going to be right in this thing. He has nasty boxing. We haven't seen Jon Jones consistently fighting high-level heavyweights, right? He just has that victory over Gane. We don't know how he's going to look when the fight plays out for the long haul. That Gane fight was so quick, okay? We're going to get to the betting line here in a second, but this fight has all the potential to play out very closely. I'm telling you guys right now, I'm very excited to see if that's the case. Wouldn't be surprised if Jon Jones does something phenomenal once again, because Stipe will put himself in those positions. Maybe Jon Jones hits him with something wild or gets him down and ground and pounds him. And we've seen him go out there and have phenomenal performances like that before. Of course, that's alive to happen. But I'm going to say this fight plays out a lot closer than you guys think. Take a look at the betting line here. We'll jump right to it. Jon Jones is a huge favorite. He's like a -700. Stipe is a +450. I think the value's on Stipe. There's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of question marks. Stipe has phenomenal boxing, and I could see him landing some strikes that keep him right in this fight. Jon Jones will throw those unorthodox types of strikes. Stipe will work the boxing. We've seen Stipe have a lot of success there. Remember when he knocked out DC, working the body, coming up low, then working low and then setting up the high strikes, finishing DC against the cage. That was nasty. I'm so excited for this fight. Keep an eye on this. I'm going to have this on record right now. We've already seen Jon Jones' toes all taped up. Towards the tail end of his career, he's had these issues with his toes, right? We saw the injury that he sustained against Chael Sonnen. If Chael would have survived that fight, he would have won that fight via the fight being stopped with Jon's toe hanging off and whatnot. And he's had these consistent issues. They did something in his last fight too, right? They were checking the tape on it going into that Gane fight. If this fight's playing out and things are getting ugly, I could see something happening with that toe again, where it could kind of affect him. So keep an eye on that. I want to have that on record. Maybe Stipe wins this fight due to an injury of Jon Jones's toe falling off. But all in all, I do have to side with the GOAT of the fight game. All right, I got to side with Jon Jones here. If Stipe gets this victory, he's going to take a huge leap into the GOAT rankings. I'll forget about it. He'll really jump into my top 5. I'll make a video about that if that happens. Jon Jones, if he gets this victory, it puts such a huge feather in his cap, getting another legitimate win here in the heavyweight division, being a 2-time weight champion there and all that. But I think the value's on Stipe Miocic. I'm going to say Jon Jones wins this fight. Oh, man, this is a tough one, man. I kind of have to say inside the distance one way or another, because that's what Jon Jones has done throughout his career. And we've seen Stipe finish 3 of his 4 losses. He puts himself in those types of positions. I'm going to say Jones gets a finish. Maybe like a ground and pound type of finish, something like that, something nasty as things are wild in there. And Jones just is that much superior, just makes the right moves. Give me Jon Jones inside the distance. With a line like that, I guess you guys want a specific method or victory. I'm going to say he doesn't get the sub. He does get the TKO. I've never seen Stipe sub before. I think things are going wild in there, and we see strikes ending the fight for Jon Jones. I hope I'm wrong. I'm rooting for Stipe. I'll let you guys know right now. I'm rooting for Stipe Would love to see the underdog pull it off. I've always been a huge Stipe Miocic fan. I remember waiting to see him make his UFC debut. That's how long I've been following Stipe. So he was a fighter that always had a world of potential. Give me Jon Jones to get that finish, though. All right, guys, that's going to wrap this thing up. I'm feeling more energetic towards the end of this video than I typically do. I guess that just shows you how much I really like this fight card. I enjoyed this, guys. I really appreciate all you that hung out with me throughout this entire video. Got to leave you with some parting words. Just real quick, if anyone wants to work with me for my official plays, reach out to me. I'll give you further information. Please go follow me on my social media. Got that scrolling below. And this is what I'll leave you with. It's always one of my most important messages that I think that's easy for me to just get out there to you guys. And I think it really carries a lot of weight. I just think that you guys should be paying very close attention to what you're putting in your bodies. Maybe some of you don't want to hear that. But specifically with what's going on in the world right now, could be a great movement as far as just pushing things towards having more healthy options in front of us and giving people the knowledge of the damage of putting certain things in their body and just having all the availability of all this crap out in front of your face. I understand at the end of the day, it's your responsibility, but we don't need all these things put in front of us. Maybe we can avoid some of that. But like I said, at the end of the day, it is your responsibility. Make sure you understand the difference of putting that crap into your body or putting in some good stuff into your body and the difference of how you're going to feel. We're starting to cruise in to the winter time. We're cruising into the last couple months of the year. Daylight savings time has hit. It's getting dark early. I felt that the other day. I mean, just seeing it get dark around 5 o'clock, man, it could be a little bit depressing as far as I'm concerned. I like to have that sun hitting me. I like the long days, but make sure you're at least putting some good stuff into your body, because if you're eating like a slob, putting poison in your body, you got the sun hiding from you, you may not feel as good as you could feel. So I'm just going to promote that you take care of your guys' self and you put a little bit of effort into learning the difference. I watch some of these videos, man. There's this one girl, this lady I watch, if anybody knows her, she's like a big lady. She's on Instagram and she just makes these viral meals for her husband. And she's so sweet. She has a great heart. If anybody wants to comment below who she is, if you know what I'm talking about, she's kind of viral, but she just doesn't know. I could tell, man, she's making all these meals and she's trying to even make these videos now where she's cleaning it up and trying to be more healthy. And even the way she puts certain things into her food, she doesn't have the knowledge. No one ever passed it down to her. She never put enough energy to research and learn it. And I recommend you guys do learn the difference of putting all this crap into your food. All right. Leave you guys with that. Hope you all have a great week. I hope to see you for the fight companion for UFC 309. If I do that, I'm on the fence if we'll be doing that or not. I'll try to get this one rolling for you guys. It'll be a great one. And leave you with that. Signing out. Teller.
The teller.